to the Kennedy Events Podcast, where we feature top marketing, communications, and future of work leaders and share their biggest takeaways and insights. We love these conversations and hope you will too. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Kennedy Events Podcast. I'm your host, Paige Buck. Past guests include Julie Liu of AvePoint, Alyssa Glassman of Recharge, and Anna Nicholson of Yahoo. And today, I am delighted to have David Aronica, Head of Growth Marketing at Yellowbrick Data, where he sits at the intersection of demand gen and sales development. He is focused on all things pipeline generation, combining broad brand awareness tactics with a highly targeted prospecting approach to bring Yellowbrick to as many customers as possible. Before Yellowbrick, David has worked at venture-backed startups Parsley, which was acquired by WordPress VIP, and Splash, event marketing software, as well as a bootstrap tech-enabled services company, Pliancy. And before we dive in with David, today's episode is brought to you by Kennedy Events. Kennedy Events creates stress-free conferences and events, providing expert management and design for all your corporate event needs, from in-person to hybrid and virtual. And you can learn more about us at kennedyevents.com. So hello, David. Thanks for being here.
Hey, happy to be here. Good to see you.
I'm super curious to hear what your, okay, this is a big, scary question. This is the most scary question I'll ask. Your ideology about sales and marketing, what you've learned from the companies you've been at so far, and how you're applying them to your new-ish job at Yellowbrick.
Yeah, I think it's like, we're all on the same team, I think is the basic place to start at. I think like leaving your ego at the door in terms of like who's getting credit for what is an important place to start. And when you're thinking about bridging that or just like how you're going to work with people on either side of that, the revenue team. I think that's also why it's like teams are calling it revenue and versus like sales or marketing, or we all have our domains and functions anyway. But yeah, I think when I was an SDR starting my career, I was always very intrigued to learn from marketing. I think it was just something I was always interested in. I think because of that, and I also just got to work with some amazing marketing leaders. I was always looking, and maybe just because I was interested, but to see how these teams collaborated together and what we could do and how we could capitalize on the things that marketing was producing in our SDR, well, in my role as an SDR and then leading those teams. So I think that is being on the same team and kind of having an open mind around how you can get the best outcomes is really important.
So if having no ego, or at least trying daily to leave that ego at the door and picking it up on your way back out, is part of the success, part of like a necessary component, what else like makes or breaks successful collaboration?
Yeah, I think like having an idea for what the end user experience is, even if you're talking about something internally. So, even if we're thinking about it from a marketing approach, I think you and I have talked about like marketing, putting something together that we think is really impactful. Maybe we're working with our product marketing team on a new product launch or a new persona that we want to test out messaging with. How we then roll that out to people on the front lines, like your sales development reps or AEs, or even solutions engineers that might be talking with your middle state, your mid-funnel customers, how they're actually going to use this asset or research or call script that they might that you might be putting together or helping them put together is really, really important. So I think it's not just about user experience from thinking about that from like how your customers are interacting with your brand or your product, but then your stakeholders internally, and that's your sales team in a lot of ways. So I think just having that, and like maybe that's the enablement component of it, and thinking about that, even if it's like a small asset, to get the most bang for your buck out of what you're creating and what you're trying to do.
Where are there like huge risks of breakdowns between, I mean, we can think of these as one team, but nevertheless, they see different things. They're focused on different things. What are the big breakdowns that you see? And yeah, I'll stop there.
I think like sometimes it's like a problem of like, what is the team incentivized? I think this is like maybe a cop-out answer, maybe not. Like sometimes you have the teams that are just simply misaligned from like a metric perspective, or like what is the driver of how this team makes money, right? And that could lead to like really awkward conversations, or things where like if a marketing team is completely based on generating marketing qualified leads, MQLs, well, that's one thing that we can absolutely control in terms of attracting who we think, and then lead scoring and getting people to take some kind of journey through our website, or like journey through our brand in some kind of way, or download a product or something. And then you have an SDR that is very much completely gold on generating opportunities. There might be this breakdown in terms of what is actually a qualified opportunity and what is a lead, right?
Mhm.
And I think like that is kind of like always, that's like the root of a lot of the push and pull between marketing and sales of, well, we're generating these people that are aware, or they've at least taken some kind of action, they know something about us, but are they the buyers? And I think just being really clear about like what we're trying to do and who we're trying to attract at every stage of that journey or experience for them can help break down some of those silos. But I think like that's where leadership just stepping in and setting kind of the tone of, this is what we're trying to do at each of these stages. This is what is success. And then just being really clear to people is some way to solve that.
Do you have an opportunity to see like market leaders in this? I imagine, I mean, one of the reasons I love having conversations like this on this podcast is it lets me get to know like how other teams function, when that's opaque to most people in the day-to-day. How do you learn what like the best teams are doing and where they're focusing their energy or like aligning their team?
Yeah, you mean like my peers?
Yeah. Like how do you get a chance to like even learn what your peers are doing?
Yeah, I mean, pretty grassroots, in a pretty grassroots way. I mean, I don't hesitate to reach out to people. Either one, just like staying in touch with people and building a network through individuals I've either met at events or at smaller group dinners, or even just like out socially, and then maybe serendipitously meeting people that work in this field generally.
Mhm.
And then also just very proactively too. I think I'm kind of shameless about reaching out to people on LinkedIn, and even in some ways just saying like, hey, I don't necessarily have any way to pay you back for this right now, but if you wouldn't mind spending 20-30 minutes, I would love to pick your brain. That has been a strategy and a tactic that has worked almost 100% of the time. Sometimes I am able to return the favor in some kind of way, but I think it's kind of part of the tactic is I'm just kind of upfront about that. Like, I'm not sure if there's anything like you will get out of this, but I do this a lot with aspiring SDR leaders. So maybe that makes you feel good that I'm paying it forward somewhere else. Yeah, I just reach out to a lot of people. I also, I like to consume a lot of blogs and books and podcasts. So
what are your favorite blogs and books and podcasts?
I mean, I think one podcast I've recently gotten into, because we started to work with this company called Refine Labs, which is a marketing agency, demand agency based out of Boston. They're all over, and they're working with companies similar to Yellowbrick, and their podcast is amazing. And they also have a private community called The Vault, which is access to resources, intellectual property that they created. So that's kind of like a pretty niche community I've gotten into recently.
That's smart.
Or at least access to recently. And SaaStr is always something that I'm reading and keeping up on, as well as I like First Round Capital a lot. Unusual Ventures, I think, also puts out a lot of really great content. So people in the VC world, and just other blogs that are even people in the marketing and the agency space as well.
What are you listing for now? Like what are some of the biggest pain points you're trying to solve for that you would be like, call somebody up and say, help me out? How are you solving this?
Yeah, I mean, Yellowbrick is a company that I only recently joined almost 4 months ago. And this was my first foray into the data warehouse space, which is definitely the most technically complex product that I've worked with so far. So who we're marketing to is a new persona for me. I think I've spent really the majority marketing and selling into marketers and well, I mean, that this last company was more of an IT consulting firm, so that was maybe started to bridge this gap. So some of the things that I'm really starting to learn a lot more about is like the persona itself, and what either data warehouse architects, like the users of our product, what they care about, so we can start to speak to them in a really educated way. I think that's really, really important because I think it's easy to be really off base with these personas as well. So that for me has been the biggest point of education and trying to learn about the customer, and to do that in a way that I can bring that, some light on the tactics that we're and the strategies we're trying to deploy going forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's interesting when you move into a space where understanding that client is just more opaque to you. Like, I don't know what you look like. I don't know what drives you. I don't know what coffee you drink. I don't know, I don't know what gets you out of bed in the morning. Yeah, interesting. That is, I feel that challenge because like you, I feel like I'm mostly selling to people where like the Venn diagram between them and us is a pretty strong overlap. So like, I'm gonna get you pretty deeply on some level. And I'm just trying to fill in around the edges. I get how that's a real challenge.
And I think like we always try to do that in terms of like, all right, well, how can I relate to this so that I can try to like, think about this in any kind of strategic way, right? I think that has been difficult, right? Because I am not in any way a data engineer, even remotely, right? But I am in a lot of ways an end user to the products that are being created. And like when I say products, even like reports or like workloads that like data that I need to do my job on a daily basis and make decisions and interpret. So that's been one way I'm trying to put myself, like, if it's not directly in their shoes, I at least understand the outcomes and the outputs that are important to the business when we're thinking about what that persona is actually like producing and driving forward. And I think that has helped in a place where like you can't directly relate. You still have like business interactions or personal interactions with these people that are in all of our companies or a lot of our companies. So that's a way to try to like, take that a little bit of a step away, but still relate in some way.
Yeah. You mentioned, you are an end user of other products and tools or generating reports. Yeah. Are there tools that your teams use that help them like move the ball forward? I'm thinking of things like Gong or.
Yeah. We have like everything under the sun. I mean, we're trying to actually consolidate a bit. I think that Gong is like
your tech stack's too tall. Like
yeah. Gong is like is absolutely one of them. Gong is such a cool product. I mean, I think like in this educational period, right, and joining Yellowbrick, I was like, I just want to get on to calls, and listen to how customers are talking about their pain points, and then also like how we pitch our solution. And we're all in that motion, and we're all kind of very excited about this next phase that we're trying to take Yellowbrick through, and to not have to load 8 people onto a call because we can all just watch the Gong later. Is incredibly important. It is like a really, really critical part, I think, of any marketer's journey. And I think if you're not doing those things, you're not listening to those calls, like it's probably the lowest hanging fruit in terms of what you can do to inform your strategy or what you might need to do to improve on your messaging or so forth, if that's something you need to improve. So Gong is in there. I mean, we use a lot of tools from like the SDR perspective. From outreach is our main kind of sales engagement platform. We also use LinkedIn Sales Navigator and Orem, which is this power dialer. So we are at Yellowbrick primarily cold calling. So the SDRs spend the vast majority of their time calling through lists and trying to get live conversations on the phone. So that product Orem is really, really useful for us. And on the operations side, we're pretty married to Zoom Info. So we have Zoom Info, and we just kind of brought in their operations OS product, and
Is that
really
the CRM
awesome team.
or is that something else?
We have Salesforce as our CRM, and
Okay.
Zoom Info is kind of like our data layer that's underneath everything in Salesforce. And this new product we brought on just helps us like enrich, clean, and keep that data as fresh as we possibly can. And then of course we use Yellowbrick's data warehouse to take all the data from all of these different places, and then to get the most insights. And I utilize Tableau as our BI tool, which is someone listening to this might be like, wow, I haven't heard that name in a long time, or there's a lot of other more interesting products.
But what is it? What is Tableau?
It's a visualization, data visualization tool. BI, okay. In terms of taking all these different sources, and then you can use Tableau to match that data up in ways to then present the most useful information. Like Salesforce is not great about different types of reports, but it's like it has all the data you need.
Yes.
But then you usually need to match it up with something in HubSpot or something in Zoom Info that you might not have exposed on like the front end of Salesforce, or something in Outreach. And so you can take all of that and then.
So getting these things to talk to one another, but also like, I mean, I really understand that, because in HubSpot, I'm like, in theory, you have all of these data points. I mean, we're, a fraction of what you guys are trying to do. And in theory, you have all of these data points. Why can't you forecast this? Or why can't you give me this make these two pieces of data talk to one another and give me something I want?
Yeah, you usually need it from somewhere else. And so then people just like go into spreadsheets, right? There's nothing wrong with that, frankly. Like, I mean, I think there's so many times when we're like banging our heads against the wall trying to figure out like the best way to do something, when ultimately like we probably could have spent the last 15 minutes just pulling up a spreadsheet and doing it that way.
Yes.
It might not be the most like scalable solution, and we might have to rebuild that the next time we get together for whatever conversation that we're having. But it's something that I got to keep on going back to, especially the past couple months, and working with our COO Jason and Mark Fields, who's our SVP of sales. Sometimes it's just like, the thing that we're going to do is not going to be the most scalable solution right now, but it is going to get our job done today. And I think like in some ways you like start kind of shaking like, man, are we going to regret this in a couple of months? But I think as long as you're kind of like eyes open about it, getting something done now versus trying to have the most perfect, scalable, foolproof solution. I don't know. That's better for me, at least.
Oh, I really feel that, because you can also put a lot of effort into the scalable full-time solution only to find in 18 months that it no longer suits you. Like you thought you accounted for all of the components, and then you're like, well, that was a lot of effort expended.
Or like, are we going to use this process again? Or like, or am I just trying to get an answer to something? I think that's a really important way to think about it too, is like, if you're just trying to understand something for this like moment in time and to get an answer or to indicate something that a path you may go down, like maybe you don't need to lay all the pipes to have like this perfect infrastructure to your data. I guess it's like, that's like very specifically on like the infrastructure of your data part of it.
Yes.
But if it is something you're going to always be going back to, then maybe we should actually like really do this right out the gate. So I guess knowing what you're trying to solve is critical.
Well, I think too, I wonder if some of that is like, let me just mock this up in a spreadsheet now to solve the now problem. And if I find myself going back to it, then at least I have a straw man for what I'm looking to build. Like, can you just
I had that conversation today.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. How are you... How, if at all, are you employing new tools like ChatGPT and generative AI?
Yeah. I mean, I think I usually have ChatGPT up in one of my tabs. I find it extremely useful to get quick answers. I think it's what I'm using it for. And like, there's so much good information out there on like LinkedIn or elsewhere of like how to use it in a really impactful way to get the answers or like get the best outcome from it. And I think the more that you practice with it, the better the outcomes are in terms of like how to prompt it, giving it things to read, but that's like setting the tone for your conversation. and then being really clear about what you're trying to get out of it, I find it incredibly, incredibly useful. Either like in meetings, I will usually like say, hey, I got this from ChatGPT, or sometimes I won't because I just needed the quick answer to something. So yeah, I find it really, really helpful as a place. Also, if like you have writer's block from like trying to write up a series of emails, even for a nurture campaign, or tweets or LinkedIn posts, or taking this blog post that was long form and condensing it into maybe other areas that I want to present to this persona, giving it some of those things ahead of time and saying, hey, this is what these product leaders may care about. This is what our engineering leaders may care about. Now, can you read this thing and parse out the pieces that you think are most important? It's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've gotten a lot of
I heard an agency owner say that she was using it to, it's like, it's not the copy she'll necessarily use on her website, but she's using it to refine her thinking. Like, can you give me 3 reasons why a company would need our services?
Yeah.
And then like, now refine that. So it sounds like you're really getting 2 things out of it. You're getting practice with engaging with it, which we're all going to need.
Yeah. That's for sure.
And then you're also getting like real output that's useful and time saving now.
Yeah. And some of the things that it spits out are horrible, and some of the things that it spits out are fantastic. But I think like that's comes with the practice of like, if you're getting horrible outcomes from it, like maybe you aren't the problem, right? Like maybe you're not actually giving it enough information to get something that's useful.
Yeah.
And so I think like these tools are not perfect, right? I think they're like, and I think ChatGPT does a good job of like telling you what the downfalls are. So yeah, I think it's incredible. I think like if you're not starting to integrate those types of tools into just like your day to day, you probably should at least consider it, because I think it just supercharges us. It makes us a lot better. I don't think these tools are going to like in any like crazy dystopian way start replacing creatives or even marketers or both, or any role really. But I think you can find ways to be a lot more effective if you are using them.
Yeah. I mean, I think after the initial freak out, we're all kind of taking a pause. They're not going to take over tomorrow anyway.
Probably not.
Probably not. Fingers crossed. Yeah. Who are some of the people you most admire in this field? And who are you? You talked about how you go about learning from folks, but who do you get the most out of?
Yeah. Man, to name names. I think I'm gonna probably end up naming people that I worked with and have spent a lot of time with. And when you say this field, I mean, I guess we're talking about marketing, but I might expand a little bit beyond
please
that.
do.
I think going back, where to start? I mean, I'll start in kind of the marketing realm, and at Splash, I got to work with a woman named Amy Holtzman, who's now the CMO at Check. She would be awesome to have on this podcast. But yeah, she is someone who I think really taught me a lot about, like, before I even knew what the term demand generation was. Like, I was managing the team at Splash. I was really excited about learning more about marketing, and she was someone that was always incredibly thoughtful about helping me understand, as the SDR leader, the importance of the programs and the campaigns that she was running, and educating me in a way that I could be really, really confident in presenting things to my team if she or someone from her team couldn't be there. So she really like took me under her wing, and it made me feel like a part of the marketing team. And I think because of that, we had a really good relationship in terms of our marketing and sales alignment. Someone else I really, really admire, and there's like so many people in my career that I could probably point to, but I mean, the CEO of Parsley, Sachin Kamdar, just in terms of his like patience and how methodical he was in Parsley's strategy. I mean, it always felt like he was 5 steps ahead, and he just knew where he wanted to be and the vision that he painted for the company, and he just always kind of stayed at it. And I think it's really easy to like get distracted or get off base in terms of why do we exist? What is the value that we serve to our customers? And I think he was really, and then like, you know, even to this day, knew what he was trying to do. And I think because of that, he was just such an awesome leader to work for. And he also gave me like a huge opportunity to go from being an SDR to managing that team and building that team with him. And, you know, without someone kind of taking a chance on, like, I was only 23, 24 when we started to build that team, you know, he definitely helped me set off on a massive career trajectory. So a lot to thank him for. And he was also just, I just admire the way that he leads in a very humble and clear way. You know, I'm now working back with someone who Mark Fields, who's the SVP of sales at Yellowbrick. We worked together for 3.5-ish years at Splash. And he's, in terms of rigor and work ethic, I think he is someone that I really admire in terms of, you know, even today, he is in the trenches in our sales process, and he's not leading from, you know, kind of sitting on the throne as the SVP, but he's leading from the front, taking discovery calls, learning as much as he can about how our customers are going to use our cloud offering and what their pain points are. And to see the way that he's kind of just jumping in and getting his hands dirty, I admire, you know, that mentality. And I think there's like no job too small, maybe is a good way to put it. In terms of like just owning the results. And that's not just like from analyzing a spreadsheet and saying, this is what we need to do, but owning it by being that close to the customer. I think that's the best type of leadership that you can display of your team.
You said something I thought was really powerful in there, because you said the words rigor and focus. And I'm curious how you distinguish rigor and focus from just like hustle and grind.
I think hustle and grind, you can be the person that's like completing the most Asana tasks. You know, you can like have the most emails, you can like send out, you can do the most cold calls, right? I think rigor and focus is always asking the question, how does this link back up to our strategy? And if it doesn't, and if it's something that's now distracting you or setting you off on a different course, then you're doing your team a failure, right? I think that's like the major difference. I think people can hustle. I think hard work is like a basic component of what you need to do to be successful. But I think it's actually way harder to know what not to work on and what not to spend your time on, and to just force yourself to prioritize and focus on the things that are truly most important. I think that's a motion of leadership. I think great leadership does that incredibly well in terms of providing context to the people on your team, the people that work directly for you, but in a way that they can then communicate that to the people that work for them. And I think if you're doing that well and you're providing that context and leading people with like, these are the most important priorities and why, so that they can figure out what to do with that information, then they're not just going to be ramming their heads into a wall trying to outwork their peers, but it's going to be, is what I'm working on today the most important thing that I can be working on for the purpose of the business? And I think that is where we want everybody to be asking that question every single day. And I think that's the true difference between like rigor and focus and this hustle kind of mentality.
Yeah. Well, I love how there's a couple of things you hit on there that I think are also really big. One is that idea of like alignment toward the bigger goal. And even just, I mean, I've seen some organizations just, not being clear on that goal, or maybe there's a disconnect between like where leadership is going and what everybody's doing day to day. So you are just being like, I got it done. I got 1,000 Asana tasks checked off.
Yeah. And at Pliancy, there was that time, right? I mean, I think someone I would also throw into that list before was two people. I mean, Marcus Olson, who's the CEO at Pliancy, and Patricio Pace, who's the VP of operations, and getting to work with the two of them was probably the best. I mean, not to like belittle anything else that happened before that, because I loved all these opportunities, but working with them was just so insanely fun because we were growing so fast at this late 2020 into 2021 was a huge year. And then we were kind of at that place that we were like, everyone felt like we were working incredibly hard, but it was unclear if we were all like working on the right things at the right times and what was the most important thing. And it really took us kind of like growing up or realizing like we are now leading an actual company that like deserves way better leadership than what we are giving the company right now. And I think Marcus really took that at the helm. And it was a lot of us trying to figure out what to do kind of in a day-to-day basis, because I don't think any of us had been that exposed to that kind of growth and then had that level of responsibility. And we made a lot of mistakes, but I think Marcus was always really good about kind of owning that as a CEO and then setting that direction and tone. And I think that was critical. I'm not sure if we did it incredibly well, frankly, but I think we had a feeling that around what we wanted to do, but I think we learned a lot about communication and leadership through that. And he gave us the ability to fail. And I'll always really admire him for that, because I think you can't really grow unless you're in a safe place to take risks, knowing that you might fail. And that I think unlocked a lot of learnings for myself and then for everybody who was on that ride.
Yeah. So if you've got that, like the safety and the structure that enables you to take risks, do you have any examples of like, I don't know, fun, crazy risks you've taken with either, and maybe that's skydiving, I don't know. Fun, crazy risks you've taken and ones that whether they've gone exceedingly well or failed, like, and what you learned from them.
I think like one of the things that we saw early at Pliancy, it was not necessarily early at Pliancy is like life cycle as a company, but when we started we were primarily working with VC firms based in like the Silicon Valley area, and then started to expand into Boston. I was living in Denver at the time, and they had started to really like catch fire working with the biotech and life science companies that this segment of VCs were specifically investing in and creating. And so we really doubled down on that as a growth strategy. And I think that was extremely intentional. And the risk that we took is that we kind of put like all of our eggs into that basket. And so we really got close with a couple of the firms that we were working with, and we utilized that relationship and then also the way that they were forming these companies from the onset, and then basically spinning them out of the VC directly into forming them as a company. And we were uniquely set up as an IT consulting firm to help them do that kind of on a consistent basis. And then we financially incentivized them to do that by giving them a steep discount as they were getting up and running. And we were able to build a model that we could recoup the cost from that, within the first easily within the first 6 months, but then significantly over the next 12 to so forth.
You had like a theory of change for your company that was like, we can discount this now because the lifetime value of the client is going to pay off.
Exactly. We basically like thought about it like customer acquisition cost. Like you could never do that really from like an accounting practices, but like that was how we thought about it. It was like, we'll use that like discount as kind of like the way to think about that. And the learning from that was like, we, by not diversifying our portfolio, like that put us in some really painful situations at times. And I think the learning for me was like going all in on one strategy is likely not the move ever. And at least having some kind of way to diversify your portfolio, especially from like a revenue-based perspective, in like these economic times, especially, is like very important.
Yeah.
And so while that was like a really innovative and like it helped us grow significantly, I think like we would look back on that and say, we should do that and be focusing and generating partnerships in other industries and figuring out how we can maybe go up market and not just working with these startup companies or think about how to expand our channel partnerships and resellers or whatever it could have been, right? And so I think that was hard in some ways because we were only spending resources that we felt could have a direct impact on revenue. But I think it was part of a learning experience and also just a growth experience for that company.
Yeah. Some awesome lessons in the struggle too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I'll give you final question. You were talking about how you worry about being able to pay it back when you go and ask somebody for their time, but that you talk to, junior folks in your industry or SDRs on the rise all the time. What's the number one thing you would want, somebody who came to you for like advice or experience or input, to, I don't know about the industry and the challenges right now?
I think like the thing that is always is like someone I used to work with is coming to me and they're asking about like advice for what they should do next. And I think what I've been telling people a lot recently is like, go with the person, the company or the person that you think you're going to learn the most from, and don't overthink the part of like, well, if I take this job, like, am I going to be able to do the VP of sales track or the VP of marketing track, or am I ever going to be able to become a product manager down the line? Because I think we overthink like, well, the next job has to be on that track. Like it has to, if it doesn't get me to that thing, then why should I take this? Or how is it going to get me there? And I think that is where I'm trying to like, don't worry too much about the thing that is 5 years, 10 years ahead of you. Worry about the thing that is in front of you and the experience, and like lean on the side of like the experience and the learning that you're going to get. Instead of like, how does this help me to hit my 5 to 10 year plan? Because like shit changes, and like you might get laid off because tech is just like in shambles, right? Or you might decide that you don't actually like doing this thing. And so I think we get like very caught up in thinking of this like grand vision for what we believe our careers are going to be, and then we might lose a great opportunity to work with some really exciting people, even though you might not understand the product or the market that it's in. So yeah, I think it's like, don't overthink your career as a whole. Just think about what can you get out of the position that you're in, the people that you're working with, the people you might want to work with. And you can always correct the course if that's even what you want to do.
I think that's brilliant advice. Thank you. That's awesome. And we'll stop there. So cool. I have had so much fun talking to David Aronica, head of growth marketing at Yellowbrick Data. David, where can people find you?
Yeah, on LinkedIn is probably the easiest. I think it's probably easy to find, the / David Aronica. Or just at david.aronica@yellowbrick.com or at Gmail if you want to hit me up personally.
Don't offer that. Don't offer that. That's dangerous.
It is all good.
We'll put the ones you want to link in our show notes, and people can find you there. Thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Kennedy Events Podcast. Come back next time and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.